one of the things that we found is by people sharing stories, sharing narratives, it really helps people to not feel alone in their stress. You know, when you realize other people are struggling with this too, it can really help people to settle down. And I remember talking to this one young junior doctor, and he was really struggling because he wasn't able to keep up with the research. He said, I'm really trying to keep up with the research, but I'm not managing. And I said, well, how many research papers are published in your area? And it was a huge amount. And I said, if you were advising someone else that was coming through, someone lower down in the ranking of medicine, what advice would you give them? He said, I'll tell them it's not manageable. I said, oh, right, okay. So you cognitively, you know it's not manageable, but you feel like you should be managing. And when you realize that actually some of these things aren't manageable and other people are struggling with it too, it can be a real relief for people.
Hello and welcome to Different Conversations, where every week we have a different person from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences here at the University of Westminster, talking to us about what's interesting, about their research and what they're doing at the moment. And this week we have, in case you can't tell, a bit of a Christmas themed chat. Today I'm talking with a good friend of mine, Justin Haroun, from the Westminster Centre for Resilience. Justin, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. Apologies for not being fully Christmas themed. I wasn't resilient enough to get out there and get some costumes.
We'll overlook your lack of Christmas cheer. Thought I have to admit I've turned one up a little bit, having just done a teaching session and putting it on for the students because it's more fun this way.
Good. Yeah, but they must have appreciated it.
I like to think so. It's all a bit of fun, isn't it? And I have to admit, the Christmas tree I did steal from my wife's office. And by office, our other room in my small London flat. You run the Westminster Centre for Resilience. And you're the most chilled out person I know, especially in academia, because our lives are very stressful sometimes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to start from the start, I guess, with you. Like, what is resilience?
Yeah. So it's a really good question, and there's quite a lot of definitions. And actually, when we work with people, when we work with organisations or healthcare providers or individuals, we often start what do they mean by resilience. There's quite a lot of misunderstanding about what resilience is, what resilience isn't. The definitions can vary a little bit. But one of the definitions that I like to use has a real practical implication. So it's about our ability to prepare, adapt, and recover from adversity or challenging situations. And I think that's quite a useful definition because there are three elements to that, and three sets of skills, really. Some people are very good at preparing. Some people are quite good at adapting. Most people aren't good at recovering. So that's often our focus area. How well do we recover? How well do we recover as individuals? How well do we recover as teams or organizations? Because some of the recovery times can be a bit toxic. So that's a definition of resilience. Other definitions, people talk about ability to bounce back from adversity. I talk about an ability to bounce forward. So you learn from the adversity and you adapt and you change and you bounce forward. It's about having grace under pressure. And essentially why we do this is to help people have more fulfilling lives. That's a kind of key element to it. And another little sidetrack to it is around resilience for the ecosystem, if you like, the planet. Is what you're doing creating good or is it creating harm? And trying to help people to do things that are good.
I really like that adapt and recover, and this idea of bouncing forward. I've never actually heard you term it that way before, and that's a really interesting way of putting it. We don't want to go back to where we were. We want to either improve and get better or recover in some new way. And I guess that must just be so topical at the moment, in part hence we have you on, because this year, this COVID-19 year we've had so far, a lot of the talk has been about, adapting and changing, but also a post-COVID world that might be very different to what we're used to.
Yeah, and in many ways, I think that's what science is. It is, something happens, and even though you may have prepared for it, you're going to, especially with something new like COVID, like a novel disease, all your preparation hasn't prepared you for this thing exactly. So we're having to adapt. And I think that's one of the things we're hearing now quite a lot. People saying, the scientists keep changing their mind. Well, that's because the science is changing, because it's new. And we're learning and we're adapting and we're changing with the idea that we're going to bounce forward and recover. So it is, they are three separate skills, really. And I think for us as a society, whether it's a small society like a team in an organization or the country, how well do we manage those three things? And that's what we primarily try to help people with, identifying what skills do you need to prepare for challenges, what skills do you need to adapt to challenges, and what skills do you need to recover from challenges.
And so part of the reason I want to have you on, there's a whole bunch of different ways I want to take this. And I'm conscious of the fact I have a very limited amount of time to take you down different pathways that I really want to talk about. But part of the reason I'm wearing a stupid hat or an exciting Christmas themed hat, and I have an interesting background this week, is very much about Christmas. Because we're approaching Christmas very rapidly, surprisingly rapidly.
Bit too fast.
I know. You try having deadlines for posting stuff around the world for my family. Christmas deadlines have all passed. I'm already late on everything. Anyway, as we approach Christmas, people find Christmas really, really stressful normally.
Yeah.
Why is Christmas so bad for stress and like well-being?
Evolution. One of the things about humans, we have what I kind of consider it to be a little bit like Flintstone physiology. Remember the Flintstones? So our physiology is really designed for being a hunter-gatherer. That's how we live the majority of our time on this planet. And we have this mammalian physiology that is good at dealing with short-term stress, i.e. you're going to be eaten or you're going to eat something. But that's quite short term. You're either running away from something or you're trying to catch something, hunting or being hunted. So that stress response is designed for short term. The trouble with things like Christmas is our neocortex, our new brain, if you like, starts to worry about things. All the things that Christmas should be, or that isn't. We start to worry about things that are outside of our control. We start to worry about, finances. At the moment, people worried about, are they going to make people sick? Are they going to become sick? So all sorts of factors like that. And that can dump a whole lot of stress into our system, which is designed for hunting and gathering, that stress response. But we're having the same kind of physiological response whilst, sitting at work or sitting on the bus or sitting on your couch. And that's forms a kind of loop that can form a kind of loop. So that triggers the body. The body then sends signals back up to the brain, so you're not feeling quite stressed here. The brain tries to make sense of that and starts to focus on all the stuff that's out of our control, starts to imagine how stressful it's going to be, and it can cycle around again and again. So I think that's one of the major factors that can cause stress at Christmas. And for many, Christmas is built up to be something kind of perfect. And this search of perfection causes human beings stress because it's not possible to have a perfect Christmas. But you always hear the perfect Christmas, even the narratives and the stories, everything's kind of perfect. It's white, snowy, everyone's smiling, and it's just not like that. But there is a bit of us looking outside and going, they seem to be having a different time. They seem to be having a better time. They seem to be managing better than I am, whatever that might be. And that can cause a stress because we know that comparing to others can be incredibly stressful for us. We know that with social economic status and poverty, it's not necessarily how poor you are, but looking out. I mean, yes, not having enough money is very, very stressful, and thinking about where you are and how other people are doing is also incredibly stressful. So some of the cognitive factors that keep feeding the stress system.
And presumably also something about, I don't even know how to put this. I'm trying to think back to Christmases past, but it's a large group of people as well. Like even when I wasn't an adult, I was stressed out about Christmas, I think. And now I am an adult, I'm even more stressed out about Christmas. The turkey being cooked, the decorations being in place, post around the world, the aforementioned parcel to New Zealand for my nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
Is it just that kind of negative loop we get into, just worrying about things that, how do you put it, that are outside of our control? That is the major issue here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to think about is, what's within your control, and then what's within your influence, but isn't absolutely within your control, and then what's not in your control. And if we spend all of our time worrying about the stuff that's not in our control, which there'll always be more of, always be more of that. There's a great quote by I think it's a Buddhist quote, which says, you can try and carpet the world, or you can learn to wear some slippers. If we're worried about making the world perfect and carpeting the world, that's always going to be stressful. But how do we put our own slippers on? And one way of doing that, metaphorically speaking, is to start focusing on what can I control, what can I influence. So, for example, you've got to send gifts and cards across the other side of the planet. How long it's going to take, when you need to post it by and all that kind of stuff. You missed that, Brad. You missed that deadline.
Look, a little bit. Look, my nephew watches this podcast, all right? But yeah, just a little bit. Well,
it'll be a nice extra bonus after Christmas then, even better.
Sorry, Travis.
Yes, it will feel even more special because all of the surprises will be had, and then there'll be this extra surprise. So it's a good thing. You've done a good job there, Brad.
Oh, thank you.
So that piece of focusing on what we can control and what we can influence. Now, you can't influence, if something goes wrong with a post or something like that, but you can influence getting the thing into the post box. But if you're worried about stuff that's spending time worrying about stuff that's out of your control, that's incredibly stressful. Yeah, and Christmas can do that to us because we start worrying about things that are outside of our control.
I have to admit that I am such a cliche nerdy scientist that after years of, for some reason, my wife and I always do Christmas lunches or Christmas dinners for our friends and family. And I do actually have, you'll appreciate this a lot, I think, is a protocol sheet on how to cook Christmas lunch that we modify in advance, and a Gantt chart for the day about what's in the oven at what time and what temperature. Because, yeah, I got sick of stressful Christmas lunches and burning things and it being horrible. So now we just don't worry about it and we plan militantly in advance. It works for us.
That's what air traffic controllers do, and it works for them. Checklists.
And because you've worked with all sorts of companies of control, maybe not air traffic controllers, but you've worked with all sorts of companies and major organizations with this type of resilience work, haven't you?
Yeah. So we've worked with the police, Gloucestershire Police. We've worked in the NHS, across the board in the NHS, really. From midwives and obstetricians through to surgeons. We teach the junior doctors at Guy's and St Thomas's. And then we've worked with business organizations as well, people like Microsoft, and worked with Ofcom and a whole range of other people. So quite diverse groups. And there is often specific things for that organization or for that profession. But then there are these kind of core things that kind of cross boundaries that are drainers. We talk about them in terms of drivers and drainers. What is it in your world that's driving you, and what is it that's draining you?
I have to ask then, what are some of those classic core things that you see?
Well, the classic core things are often, again, around things like, how well am I doing? You know, am I doing enough? Am I good enough? If you like, sometimes they talk about it as the imposter syndrome. You know, am I managing okay? I'm not doing a good enough job. Things like that, wanting to do more. And it's always, you can always do more. You know, in the modern working world, you can just get busy. So that's a real common one. The other common one is into relationships within the workplace, misunderstanding, miscommunication, misinterpretation of what people want. So that piece. And one of the biggest ones is email overload. This modern bane of our lives of this constant email coming in with often very unrealistic expectations about how quickly they should be answered, which is stressful.
I'm really worried you've actually just described my job quite perfectly.
Yeah, all of ours, unfortunately.
It's good to know that's actually quite core across different organizations. It's not just academia specific.
Yeah, it wasn't so much in the police. That was the one place that didn't happen so much. They had different issues, but yeah, that's probably the only place which it wasn't. They didn't have such email overload, but they had a different thing, which is paperwork. They call it paperwork, you know.
Okay, and so another thing is really interesting because when you look at some of these big corporations that you've worked with, or big organizations like the NHS, like junior doctors, like such a cliche of a stressful job. And then you look at, say, Microsoft, which is such a massive organization that you can find core things that you can pull out of that cause the tension, that cause the issues, that cause problems corporately. And then we can learn from that as individuals, and I guess, because I'm assuming if we drag back to our Christmas example, the reason we have a problem with our Auntie Mavis's Christmas pudding is not because of email overload, presumably, but there must be some sort of core overlap there that we can take on as individuals as well.
Absolutely. One of the things we talk about people is our core human experience, if you like, because when we're stressed, I mean, one of the things, you know, it's one of the things that happens when we're stressed is we become quite focused on the stress, on the stressor, which is great if you're, you know, hunting that gazelle, and it's great if you're being chased by that tiger or lion. So you need to kind of, you don't need broad focus. You don't need to be thinking about how fast the lion's running or something like that. You just want to get out of the way of the lion. So our attention can become a bit narrow and a bit focused. And one of the things that can help is to broaden our attention. And they talk about this in terms of kind of common human experience or common humanity. And one of the things that we found is by people sharing stories, sharing narratives, it really helps people to not feel alone in their stress. You know, when you realize other people are struggling with this too, it can really help people to settle down. I remember one case, we do this project where we take the doctors off grid. So we take them into the woods and we call it Doctors in the Woods. And I mean, it is off grid. There's virtually no signal there. It's kind of glamping, you know, there's no electricity, and it's great. And we do a lot of nature work with them, conservation work, things like that. And I remember talking to this one young junior doctor, and he was really struggling because he wasn't able to keep up with the research. And he said, I'm really trying to keep up with the research, but I'm not managing. And I said, well, how many research papers are published in your area? And it was a huge amount. And I said, if you were advising someone else that was coming through, someone lower down in the ranking of medicine, what advice would you give them? He said, I'll tell them it's not manageable. I said, oh, right, okay. So cognitively, you know it's not manageable, but you feel like you should be managing. And when you realize that actually some of these things aren't manageable and other people are struggling with it too, it can be a real relief for people.
Okay. And so it's all about just awareness then, I guess. And I like the way you talk about it being a kind of what was the word, shared humanity?
Yeah, shared humanity. Yeah, they kind of a common human experience. You know, we all feel distress, we all feel anger, we all feel fear, we all feel sad, and actually kind of becoming aware that we all have those feelings can be it loosens the grip of it on you. Emotions can kind of grip you, right? So when something happens and you get gripped by that emotion, whether it's fear or anxiety, I can't believe I've missed that deadline, boom. Yeah, it can really grip you, and it can really just narrow your whole world. So and that emotion serves a purpose. And biologically, it used to serve us certain purposes. Don't, with disgust, don't eat that. With fear, don't go near them. With anger, so it tells us something. It's kind of giving us messages. And when we can recognize that message, that emotional message, we can kind of make a decision. Is this useful in this situation or not? But if we can't recognize it, if we're not aware of it, then it will keep driving us. So one of the ways I think about it is, all our emotions are welcome, but not all emotions are useful in every situation. So it's learned, the awareness piece helps you to differentiate between, is this emotion helpful now, or is it not helpful now? And if it's not, what can I do to kind of let it go a bit?
And so then if we continue our kind of theme of talking about Christmas around this topic, when it comes to this this COVID-19 Christmas we're about to have in England, at least, where we're talking about small groups of families that are going to be, if anything, probably tighter than normal in terms of groups of people bubbled together, which I was wondering, is that going to be almost worse for the Christmas stresses, where you're going to have a small group of people in a small space for an extended period of time, and there's going to be tension and anxiety and pressure, and then you're worried about how close can you get to people, and there's going to be concern over, are we too close? Are we too far apart? Do we have enough? Did I get in the right bubble, the wrong bubble?
Yeah.
Is it going to be worse this year? Short story.
Yeah, I'm sure for some people it is going to be worse. There's so much uncertainty, and and one of the uncertainties: am I making the right decision? Am I making the wrong decision? Is this decision going to have a negative impact? Is this decision going to have a positive impact? And in many ways, we're kind of fighting against our humanity at the moment, which is to come together, to celebrate, to connect, to hug each other, to celebrate, to really kind of be part of family, friends, to socialize, which is really, really important for our health and well-being. So there's that piece, which is a good thing about kind of celebrating at Christmas. And then there's this other piece around, well, what should I do? What should I do that? Should I not do that? So again, if you think about it again from that perspective of focusing on the things that are within your control and are not within your control, well, there's a great huge piece now, which is literally not in our control. We don't know. So that will be an extra feed in to the stress of what's already there at Christmas, whether you're going to burn the turkey, or you're going to get the wrong present, or whatever, or you're going to miss that deadline for that postage, Brad.
You've clearly been to my Christmas with all three of those things.
Yeah, I'm glad you got a Gantt chart now, so must make things a lot better. My wife would be very, very proud of you. So it's an extra piece. It's like an extra layer on there of uncertainty. And then the people that perhaps don't celebrate together, there's going to be feelings of guilt and, I'm not seeing my parents, or I'm not seeing my grandparents. I should be, or I shouldn't be. So all of that stuff is going to be playing into this as well. So that will have an impact upon people's stress. I suppose one way of working with that, if you like, one way of helping with that is, again, to bring our attention to the things we can control. What are the things that we can control and that we can influence? So if we bring more focus to those elements, that will be hopefully be beneficial, rather than living in that zone of uncertainty, which we're not very good at uncertainty as human beings.
Okay, so for my simple brain, because I am a very simple brained person, I think you know that about me, there's a lot of this that we can't be sure about. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. but it is uncertain. So we can say, we can try and cognitively say, okay, let's put that over here, and here's what I can deal with, and then try and focus the best you can on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really big skill, actually, to say, I don't know. I mean, scientists are great at that, right? And I think for so many, and one of the things I think people have found frustrating at the moment is the I don't know. What? Because they're used to scientific knowing, but they're not used to seeing the process of how they got to the knowing. That, you know, that's kind of often a hidden process. So what they see is the kind of, well, we know this, but now we're hearing more and more of, we don't know, we don't know. And that's quite a skill to learn, to kind of recognize that you don't know something. I'm not sure, I'm uncertain. And we see this, people will know nothing about a subject and talk about it as if they know about it. And when you push them on it, it all crumbles away and there's nothing there. They don't know anything about it. But being certain is I kind of consider it a bit like a human addiction. We kind of have this addiction to certainty. So we try and make sense of it quickly and pigeonhole it. But learning to let go of that certainty and say, I don't know, can be useful. And then bringing your attention on something, well, what do I know? What can I focus on? One of the things we teach as part of the Centre for Resilience is self-regulation, if you like, breathing techniques, mindfulness. And part of that is bringing your awareness to something that you kind of is an anchor, like you're breathing. And that gives you a sense of, like, I can focus on that. So that can really help with that stress level. So bringing the attention to things you do know, things like your Gantt chart, are good things. That's actually a good strategy. What can I control? What can I put into place?
That's exactly what I wanted to talk about next, I guess. And I know this is too big a topic and too complex a topic for us to cover in 5 minutes now. But what kind of things can people start to do or start to think about to try and deal with that? Is it just, and I don't mean just because it's a lot of work, is it just prior preparation? Is it planning ahead, or is there other techniques, like you mentioned, the idea of mindfulness and breathing, that can really help people out if they do find themselves in an escalating spiral?
Yeah. So I think there are kind of short techniques and longer techniques. So actually, the short technique really is breathing. And because when we start to get stressed, one of the things that happens is we start to overbreathe because we need more oxygen, and we need more oxygen because we need more energy to escape the line. So that it can start the kind of hyperventilation, overbreathing, which can then trigger all sorts of physiological responses. So a self-regulation breathing technique can really help to settle the system down. So it can really help to calm the body down, which can then help to calm the thinking down. Quite often people talk about, think your way out of it. Actually, I think you need to calm your body first, calm your physiology first, and that gives your kind of cognitive brain a chance to not be hijacked or to become unhijacked. So in the short term, when things go wrong, taking 3 breaths is a good practice. We did this recently. We were helping some of the staff in the NHS. And you can imagine the kind of stress of the moment in the NHS. And you can't get people that are doctors to, an accident, an emergency, or an ICU unit to go out and do some mindfulness. That's not going to cut it. So we taught them to do this 3 breath pause whilst washing their hands. So they've got to do that anyway. You've got to wash your hands anyway. So if you bring in the breathing with it, and then also bring in a feeling of appreciation and gratitude. So you create this kind of positive emotional spiral, like the fact that you've got warm water, the fact that you've got soap, these kind of things can help to kind of just put a little pause into that stress system. So that's something that I would recommend, using breathing to disrupt the stress response. And then there are longer term things as well. So taking a kind of recovery, or a kind of recovery break, if you like. So one of the best recovery breaks you could take is to get out into daylight at the moment, go out for a walk in nature, connect a little bit. So notice something you see, notice something you hear, notice something you feel. Again, really helping us to be human again. So things like that. And you can do that even with how you make a cup of tea. And then the other element is around our social connection. We may not be able to have a hug with someone, you know, something we may not be able to see someone, but you can. I mean, technology now is so fantastic that you can get online and have some really deep conversations. And I've been on a few pub crawls with my best friend on Zoom, you know. So it's you can do all sorts of creative things using technology to kind of connect with each other. So things like that. So finding the activities, and the key piece with this is there are some things again that are universal, like the breathing one. That's pretty universal. Getting into nature, noticing light, getting into light. That's that, you know, moving. That's kind of universal. But then the other things, the other elements that help us to recover, that help us to be restorative, they can be quite unique. And one of the things we do at the centre is we get people to wear heart rate variability monitors for 3 days, and that measures their balance between stress and recovery, or drive and recovery. And what's really interesting is seeing some of the stories of what people do that help them to recover, and to top themselves up, if you like. And it's really interesting to see some of them. Like one guy was washing his car, really helps him with recovery. Another person was writing in their diary. Another person was pausing and having a cup of tea. With this one guy, and it was singing Madonna in his kitchen while he was cooking dinner. And you could just see this great recovery time. Having hugs with family members, doing meditation, doing their artwork, knitting. So we start to see different things. Now, if you sat me with some knitting, it would probably cause me quite a lot of stress. But for another person, that really works. So finding what is it that helps with your restoration, if you like. What's restorative for you? Because one of the things that can happen at Christmas time is we can kind of sit in the chair and do nothing, and it's actually not restorative. You know, you're just doing, you know, you're not really recovering. It might feel like you're recovering, but you're not. So what are the things that help you to recover and restore yourself over this winter period? Do the things that bring you joy, really.
What I would have thought of as distraction, but now having talked to you, I'm going to think about it as refocusing.
Yeah.
About going outside, about things that I would do, about exercising, riding my bike, for example, is where I find pleasure. Whatever it is, it's just maybe giving yourself some time during those 5 hectic days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if it's just before lunch or similar.
Yeah, yeah, and we see that. We see, you know, we've seen people in front of a TV, and some people are stressed in front of a TV. Their physiological system is showing them distressed. Some people are in recovery, and it depends, you know, what they're watching, who they're watching it with, how they feel about what they're watching. But we need to be careful of just that kind of distraction, switching off totally. You know, do things that yeah, kind of inspire you, really.
Did I have to ask, and this is the last question, but I do want to round off on this one, I think, considering our topic of the day. How stressful is your Christmas normally? And then do you deal with it well?
Yeah, so as you could probably guess by the lack of Christmas decorations, I am not the most Christmassy person in the world. However, I do have a family that is pretty Christmassy. My wife's from Trinidad, so we have parang music on all the time in the house now, which is this kind of soca music. And Christmas is a big thing in Trinidad. My dad's Muslim Egyptian, so we never really grew up with Christmas in the same way. But she really is, so she gets really into it. So Christmas for me is not very stressful. I enjoy it. And I think it's because I have very little expectation of what it's going to be like. And then when it's there and we've had the day, it feels good. Because I don't build it up into something. This is what Christmas will be. It is very much like, this is Christmas. This is nice. So it's always like a nice surprise when it comes around for me, because I'm not really looking forward to it. And then I hear the parang music and I think, oh, that's quite good. And then you smell the Christmassy smells and all that kind of stuff. So I suppose I'm kind of living in the present moment with it, really, and I quite like that.
Well, unfortunately, it's probably all we have time for today. So only really remains for me to say thank you, Justin, for that really interesting, fascinating, sadly quite pertinent chat, for me at least, about stress, resilience, COVID-19, and what our Christmas this year can be like, and even indeed how to help with that. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, whether you're watching along on YouTube or if you're listening in on iTunes, on Spotify, or any of our other audio channels. And if you are, you've missed out on our Christmas themed decorations this week. My name's Bradley Elliott, and I hope you've enjoyed today's Different Conversations.